When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Prado with Man-Made Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different because I do feel like it's important for us to talk about how the mainstream media portrays prepping. Because I saw a few articles and then, it kind of caught my attention. So I pursued it a little bit, and then I found some things on there that, made me want to say, all right, I need to make a video about this. Because it's not fair how the mainstream media portrays prepping and, calling us paranoid, calling it a waste of time, stuff like that. So I'm going to be doing this video to pretty much tell the mainstream media that they're wrong. And this video would actually be a perfect video for you to share with your friends and family, because if they're the ones listening to the mainstream media on what they're saying, on the opinions that they get, calling us crazy, paranoid, waste of time, whatever, then you can really show them this to counter those points, because that's what I'm going to be doing today. All right. Because 2020 has really taught us, I said it in the past, right, that prepping is really important. And people who have been waiting to the last minute, two things happen. One, they're paying a higher premium to getting their stuff prepared, and two, the people who don't have the money to prepare anymore, they're suffering the consequences from not preparing beforehand. So it is really important that we talk about this today. All right, so the first announcement that I have for you today is that I'm going to start doing this podcast in Spanish as well. All right, it's going to be the same information, the same everything. It's just going to be translated into Spanish. So if you have any friends or family who would benefit from listening to this in Spanish, then I would really appreciate if you would send them our way. That way they can get the headlines that's going on now, today. And not only that, on how to prepare for it properly. Not like the videos that we see all throughout YouTube and everything that doesn't really give you guidance on how to prepare or what to do. They're pretty much saying, everything under the sun except for the right way to do it. So as I've said in the past, here in Man-Made Survival, as the leader of Man-Made Survival, I want to set this standard because I don't want it to be where, different people have different answers because there's no foundation in prepping. Everybody has their own opinion. Well, here now I want it to be where we influence the entire prepper community to have a standard. All right, to when somebody asks, everybody says the same answer. It would be the same as a doctor or a lawyer or anybody like that. When you ask them about something, they'll give you the same answer. And that's how I want it to be. I want it to become a science, all right, rather than just a hobby. So that, that's the first announcement. The second one is the sponsor that we have, or not the sponsor, the partner that we have for the podcast. It's greenmedicineencyclopedia.com. Green Medicine Encyclopedia is a science-based encyclopedia providing research evidence for nutritional medicine and natural health therapies. We partner with Green Medicine Works to bring you the best medical encyclopedia money can buy in case you have a crisis hit the fan scenario or an incident when you require immediate medical attention. This encyclopedia is filled with cures and remedies for all kinds of ailments. When the supply chain stops and there's no more doctors or pharmacies, you'll be glad you bought your own copy of Green Medicine Encyclopedia. Man-Made Survival preppers get a special $40 discount with coupon code Man-Made Survival. All right, so I encourage you to go in there, check it out, because that product is really important. The best thing that it provides, aside from the information, is that you can print all that information out. You can set yourself a folder at home, and when crap hits the fan and you need to see what you're gonna need to treat some type of ailment, like the flu or a high fever or something more complicated, then you can reference back to that. And if you have to grow your own herbs and stuff like that, then you can do it in your medical garden. All right, so that's why I encourage you to get this product, and you get $40 off with the coupon code Man-Made Survival. All right, so why is prepping important? Because it will really, if it's done right, prepping can really keep you from suffering to the same degree that other people who didn't prepare would, And of course, there's a lot of variables, outside variables that really impact your survival rate. But you are in a better position when you prepare for something as opposed to not preparing for it at all. All right, and there's different things that different people prepare for. People prepare for natural disasters, and they believe that that's the only thing they should ever prepare for, because they live where hurricanes come through, so they have to prepare for that, and that's it, nothing else. Other people believe that that they should prepare for everything and anything, and pretty much the way that I stand on it is that there's different scenarios that once you prepare for those, everything else would become easier. All right, everything would be under the same umbrella, as you would say, because if you prepare, for example, for an EMP, when you know that there's going to be a 90% death rate throughout the country, because the EMP Commission did come out and say that within the 24 month time span, 90% or over 90% of the country would actually perish, because there would be no medicines, there would be no food, and all these things that would be going on, riots, people stealing and looting and everything else. So if in 24-month period, 90% of an entire country would be wiped out, I would say that preparing for that scenario would make all the other scenarios easier to prepare for. And or if you just prepare for that, whatever comes your way would be easier to handle, even if it's not specific to that. Now, my top 4 that I'm preparing for, that I encourage you to prepare for, first one is EMP, because as I've said it, as I just mentioned, over 90% of the country would perish in 24 months. The second one would be a nuclear disaster in the United States, whether it's another country doing it, or because of the EMP will create meltdowns of all the nuclear reactors all throughout the country, which most of them are focused on the eastern side of the country. Then you can prepare for that and be sure that you can survive it. The next thing would be a war. And we are really close to a war right now with China and Russia and other countries out throughout, Asia and the Middle East and Europe and other places. Because we're making the steps right now as a country to make sure that we position ourselves and to have the alliances for when that war breaks out, we'll be better off. All right, so now, the other aspect of all of this is also an invasion of the United States, because if there is a war that happens to be successful, that they do come to our shores, they do happen to have a beachhead, and they do take care of, or take over an entire area, whether it is through the air or through the land, whatever it is, then they will be able to pretty much launch a more successful invasion. So that's why it's important for us to prepare for those scenarios, because if we prepare for those, then whether a hurricane comes, you're going to be prepared, because you're going to have a bug out location already in place within land, in the mountains, that's going to be secured. A hurricane comes through, then you just go over there. If there's going to be a tornado coming your way, then you're already going to have the the storm shelter you're going to need at home. And if your home does get wiped out, then now you have a second location to go to. And for the economic collapse, and now that I think about it, that's another thing that we need to prepare for. It's this economic collapse that we're experiencing now. As I'm going to be getting into the next podcast and the one after that our economic collapse is going to be here within the next 5 years, probably sooner than that. Some people are expecting it in 10 years, but I dare to say that it's 5 years or sooner, because of all the information that's out, everything that we're seeing now. And even though that the government and other people are trying their best for keeping it from happening, they're actually the ones making it worse by printing all this money. So that's another aspect of things that we have to prepare for. Because if our money becomes so devalued that we have hyperinflation, as we saw in Venezuela, as we've seen in Zimbabwe, as we've seen in other places, right, throughout history too, then if you have everything that you need established beforehand, then you're already going to have that system set up to where it's self-sustained, and you will have to scramble to try to buy eggs or try to buy meat or try to, do whatever that other people in Venezuela are trying very hard, because they're starving. They have been starving. And, and the government has been helping them, but they only send help very few times and far in between. So it doesn't really help them that much that they get a box of food once every 2-3 weeks or even a month, when they're going to be able to finish the whole entire box in less than a week, especially if they're hungry, because they're going to eat as much as they can till they feel full, and then the entire time they're left hungry again. All right, so that's why it's important for us to prepare. That's why it's important for us to have that in mind. Now, one of the things that I noticed when I was, Googling some articles and stuff like that, I noticed that there was a little tab. It's kind of like a drop menu that has a question and gives you the answer. And it asked this: why is prepping pointless? Another reason why people think prepping is pointless is due to the financial burden. Why waste money on something you might never use? Although this is true in some cases where prepping actually does become a financial burden for families, my recommendation is to start small and always consider the value for money. So they're saying that prepping is pointless because of the financial burden. Now, granted, there is people who do go over the top and they do buy the very expensive items when they don't have money for them. We have seen, in TV shows, and we have seen in documentaries and other places where people do spend a bunch of money on preps that do not last very long time. So yes, I can see how they think it's going to be pointless because of the financial burden, but when done properly, then it's not going to be a financial burden, because remember, you are preparing for a long period of time, right? It's something that drags out. Now, if you have the money, if you're a millionaire, if you have enough money for you to prepare, buy everything at once and not even hurt your pocket, then why not do it? But if you're a regular American, in the lower middle class or a little bit higher, then you understand that you are going to be preparing for a long time. And all of those purchases are going to accumulate through time. And it's not going to be a waste of time, because it's going to be within budget. It's going to be within a time frame. And all of that is going to be accomplished through your alliance and everybody else. So it wouldn't be a waste of time nor a financial burden. Now, as I have said in the past, right? When is the last disaster that we experienced? The last one that we experienced in the United States, if you want to talk in financial terms, was 2008. So people have had 12 years to prepare for another financial crisis, as we're experiencing right now. Now, that's 12 years. You can do a lot of things, a lot of preparing in 12 years. Now, if you really want to go back to an attack on the United States, you can go back to 2001. And it's been 19 years since then. So people have had 19 years to prepare. Now, when you do it properly and you don't freak out and you don't burn yourself with the finance and everything, then you have 19 years to prepare, and then everything should be all right. Everything should be in place, and you would not have a financial burden as they claim that there would be. So done right and with a cool mind is the best thing to do it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's people spending more money now trying to get prepared now, since they had 19 years to do it and never did it. The next one that I have on here is, are preppers mentally ill? Now, this is a dangerous question, because the way that it's framed and what the answer is. So I'm gonna read you the answer first, and then I'm gonna quote something else that I found in Venezuela. Well, there's not much solid research to be had. Anecdotal observations certainly give the impression that there's a higher incidence of mental illness among hardcore preppers than in the general population. And the nature of the belief and social networks may create obstacles to diagnosis and treatment. All right, so why is that dangerous? Because who are we going to put in place to determine what is hardcore prepping? Because for some people, hardcore prepping is having 1 month worth of food, maybe 1,000 bullets, and maybe 3 guns. For some people, that's hardcore prepping. For others, hardcore prepping could be having everything. So where do you draw the line? Who draws the line? Now, the reason that is dangerous is because prepping involves fire weapons. And a lot of the talk that there has been in Congress and other places is that they want to keep guns away from the mentally ill people. So if they deem prepping to be a mental illness, then they could just come for your guns. They can come and confiscate anything they want because you're mentally ill. So the wording on this is very dangerous. And if you ever hear anything like it that comes close like that in your own state, county, city, whatever it is, then you better fight it and fight it to the death, because otherwise they're gonna make it illegal for you to prepare. Now, I have an article from it's from the organicprepper.com, and the headline is a quick reminder of how Venezuela ran out of food. Does this look familiar? And one of the things that they wrote in this article is that Venezuela pretty much made prepping illegal. All right, they used the words hoarding. What the article says is, in 2013, many began to suspect that the outlook for Venezuela was grim when prepping became illegal. The Attorney General of Venezuela, Luisa Ortega Diaz, called on prosecutors to target people who are hoarding basic staples with serious sanctions. Shortly thereafter, grocery stores instituted a fingerprint registry to purchase food and supplies. Families had to register and were audited a certain amount of supplies to prevent hoarding. So that is the reason why it's important for us to pay attention if they're doing that in the United States. Now, we did have those words kind of come out in the mainstream media, if you remember correctly, at the beginning of the pandemic, when people went out and they panic bought everything that they needed, toilet paper, whatever. Canned food was gone, meats were gone, cereals, milk, whatever. Everything was gone. And what did they say? They told people that people who went out and panic bought and they bought everything that they needed, that they were hoarders and they were frowned upon because the poor old people could not get their food, and other people could not get it either because other people were selfish. Let's remember that language was used at the beginning of the pandemic by the mainstream media. All right, now my position on that is that if these people who were, that found themselves without the ability of buying what they needed because everything was panic bought at the beginning of March, then it was their responsibility to have what they needed beforehand. That is why it's important for everyone in the United States to be a prepper. Everybody in the United States to have at least, what the government recommends, which at first was 2-3 weeks. Lately, they've been saying 6 months. But the point is that even if they were listening to the government, when the government itself says that people should have at least 2 weeks worth of food, if they would have had it, they wouldn't have to worry about it that much, because they would let the supply chain resupply the stores, to the best of their ability, even though they haven't been able to do it 100% still. But still, they would have not found themselves with nothing to eat or whatever it is that they were lacking if they would have prepared themselves first. Now, the next thing that I have for you is a headline from USA Today. Now, when you read the headline, it makes you really think, well, wow, I'm about to get some serious prepping advice, right? Here's what the headline says. 8 things preppers recommend to get you through the coronavirus crisis. All right, so I'm going to come back to it before I get into the article, because I think it's important for us to point this out, or at least for me to point this out as a prepper, because when you read it, all right, the 8 things that the preppers are pretty much saying that you should do to get you through the coronavirus. This article was published March 20th, 2020. So that was at the beginning of the pandemic. Now, you would think that these preppers, whoever they asked, because they didn't name anyone, they're saying that it was some random prepper. I don't know. But you would think that they would say, you need a gas mask, you need a suit, a biological suit. You're going to have the means to disinfect it. You're going to have, a room sealed away for if anyone gets sick or contracts the virus. Let's remember, this is the beginning of the virus, the beginning of the pandemic. And we saw all the videos coming from China where people were collapsing, they were falling over, and we really didn't know the extent of it. We just saw what we saw in China, and we didn't want that to happen to us, because the thing was that if you caught it, you were pretty much really sick, that you were gonna just suddenly collapse, sit on the ground, and then you were done for. That's what we saw coming from China. So when this article comes out March 20th, 2020, And it says 8 things preppers recommend to get you through the coronavirus. You're going to think that what I mentioned a minute ago. You're going to need the boots, you're going to need the gloves, you're going to need the suit, you're going to need the mask, you're going to need the gas mask, everything, right? No. Here's what it says. Before the coronavirus outbreaks hit the United States, leaving people panicking and shelves barren, you probably imagine a prepper as a middle-aged white guy who fantasizes about nuclear warfare in order to justify his gun collection to his wife. So I'm going to come back to that, and obviously that was a cheap shot to a prepper, right? But anyways, whatever. Let's continue on. Now, your perception has probably changed a bit. For years, people laugh at me for being a bearded prepper, and now those same people are asking me for advice. Don't worry, I'm not going to say, I told you so, but I'll instead quote John McClane. Welcome to the party, pal. Granted, many popular prepper items aren't going to help in this case. There have yet to be any major utility outages anywhere in the world due to coronavirus. Solar panels, fire starters, and water filtration kits likely and hopefully won't be much help, though they're nice to have. But with many states asking people to stay home as much as possible, it helps to have some essential on hand beyond toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Here are 8 things that any rational prepper would recommend right now to help you get through this crisis. All right, so again, the way that they're portraying it, for one, they took cheap shots, but now they're saying that they're going to give you the best advice of their life, right? Whoever they're asked as a prepper. Now, you be the judge of it, but I'm going to tell you that all of this was pretty much ridiculous. Number 1, batteries. All right, and it gives a list of reasons, or it gives a paragraph of reason why on all this 8. But I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna give you pretty much the bottom line on that item. Batteries, pretty much for toys and remote controls, and for adult toys, if you know what I mean. Now, again, that is just ridiculous. All right, multi-tools for opening packages and pulling splinters. Again, how is that gonna help with the coronavirus? No idea. Knife sharpener. They didn't really give any reason why other than just for fun. Nitrile gloves to keep hands clean, and not just for the coronavirus when you go to the store, but if you decide to work on your car or whatever, that's going to keep your hands clean. Again, not very good advice. Emergency food. Now, when I read that number 5, I was like, okay, now that maybe they're going to get into something a little more helpful, but that wasn't the case. It took a shot at the taste for shelf life, but it does not show how much food you're going to need and for how many people. So it doesn't really give you any advice on how much food to get, for how many people, how long you're going to expect the pandemic to last or anything like that. Nope. All they said is emergency food, and emergency food has been pretty much flying off the shelf. That's it, but no real advice. Duct tape. Pretty much just to patch holes in your clothing. Again, for the coronavirus, ridiculous. A positive mental attitude. Now, the way that they wrote it, they wrote that paragraph on positive mental attitude was pretty much more like be in denial. Which, who is going to help? Who is going to get that type of advice? Who's going to get the help from that? No one. Number 8, an at-home garden. Now, the way that they wrote that last one, the number 8, is since people are panic buying and everything's bare at the stores, it would be better for you to start a little garden at home, since it's the beginning of the spring, this time March 20th. That way you can have some vegetables in case there isn't none at the store. Now, that last one might be a little bit of help, but it doesn't say how long the garden takes to give you any type of produce, which would depend on what you put on the ground. It could be 60, 90, 120 days, depending on what it is. It doesn't say anything about how to start the garden. It doesn't say anything about how to fertilize or anything like that. It doesn't even say what you need. So it was just pretty much the 8 things. Now, do you really think that a prepper told them this? All right. And if they did, whatever. But that's the reason why I want to say that I don't want this to be, or I want it to become to where if somebody asks those type of questions, that there is a standard answer instead of just whoever they ask can think of, because very easily they could have said, Well, you need the gas mask. I said gas mask because at the beginning of the pandemic, again, we saw what we saw in China. We don't want to breathe that. So you would need a gas mask. The whole, and the NBC suit, right? The entire thing, you need the suit with a hood. You have the gloves, you have the pants, you have the boots and everything, as we have in the Amendment Survival store. And, you're going to need something to disinfect that. You have to go through a disinfecting phase. If you were to go to the store and come back, disinfect yourself before you go into the house. You could have had a room set up for if anybody got sick, quarantine, they stay there. Somebody healthy comes in, they give them their food and everything that they need, medicine if possible. So those are the things that they could have said. All right, they would have asked me, all right, what do we need to get us through this pandemic? In March 2020, that's what I would have said. You need all these things and you have to be careful. Don't go outside unless you need to. You absolutely have to. That was before we had all this information about coronavirus now. All right. So I want to move things along because I found this article in the New York Times, and it says, they prepare for the worst, now everyone's a prepper. And that article wasn't really useful at all in anything that it said, but pretty much all it did, it painted preppers in a light that was pretty much looking down onto people who didn't prepare. All the while making the preppers sound like they're crazy, and you still don't have to prepare, So there was no real advice or anything like that. They did quote people. They quoted preppers from different organizations, but nothing useful. Nothing that was going to really teach anybody anything. It was more like, you're stupid for not preparing. And again, I'm pretty sure that all of these preppers gave them excellent advice, different things, but since the New York Times had their own spin, they pretty much took whatever they wanted and they put it out there, and now that's, what it is. Again, painting preppers as crazy people who don't know what they're talking about. All right. The next one that I have for you is from DetroitNews.com. And this is going to be the perfect example of why we need a standard in the prepper community for when somebody asks a question, we know exactly what to say for how long and why. All right. Instead of becoming an opinion, it's a fact. It's a science. All right, let's get away from this being just a hobby that we do for fun, and let it become a way of life. That way, whatever comes our way, we're always prepared. And not only that, but we also share this with our kids, and they're gonna grow up in this culture of prepping. And even if nothing happens in our lifetime, we grow older and we die, and our kids are gonna be older. They're gonna be probably in their 50s, 60s, however old they are. But the grandchildren are going to go through it. Their grandchildren would have the culture of prepping. They would be ready for whatever happens. So that's what I wanted to be. If you remember the previous podcast, I shared how a lady in South America, she said that she had not seen that level of lack of food, food shortages since the 70s or 80s. I can't remember correctly when. But either way, she had from, let's say, the 80s till 2020 to get prepared for the next time it happened. Yeah, and she said that she didn't think she was going to be in the situation. Now, she got older. I'm sure she has kids, and her kids could have grown in the same culture of prepping, their kids, and everybody would have everything they need stored up right now for them to be able to eat it, and not to have to suffer the consequences of shortages of food all throughout the world. All right. So again, this article is from DetroitNews.com, and it says, COVID-19 caught us off guard. Here's what disaster preppers say we needed to do all along. Now, again, from the headline, right? You think you're going to get great advice, but that is not the case. How long should supplies last? 3 weeks, 3 months, or a year? Depending on which prepper you ask. Now, there again, all right, that is the reason why we have to have a standard in the prepper community. And that's why I wanted to become. As the leader of Amendment Survival, I want to make sure that in this industry, in this, whatever it is that you want to call it, that we have a standard, that we have a science put down, and we know exactly what it should be. It shouldn't be the matter of opinion so much as a matter of fact. And it should be at the very least 2 years, because if it's an EMP, even if an EMP happened in the United States and the United States military was successful on repelling any type of attack from China, Russia, whoever, it would take them at least 18 months to be able to start establishing any type of grid in major cities. All right, so that's one of the reasons why we say at least 2 years, because you're also going to have seeds, you're going to have livestock, because you're going to have to use those seeds and that livestock throughout the summer, and only use your food supply stock if you have crop failure, or for whatever reason you didn't grow any food, or you don't have any livestock or anything like that. That's going to be your safety net. But if you're at home 24/7 because of an EMP happened, you no longer have a job, you no longer have to go anywhere, then growing your own food and having your own livestock is going to become your daily job. All right, so it says, go back to the beginning. How long should supplies last? 3 weeks, 3 months, or a year, depending on which prepper you ask. You have to decide what length of time makes sense to you. The Joneses agree. During their 90-day survival trial, they learned that they had packed too much tuna for their liking, but not enough cat food. They fed the tuna to the cat and adjusted the shopping list going forward. Also, Kennelly Jones realized we needed more chocolate. Where to keep it all? Don't be afraid to do a spring cleaning to maximize your pantry or closet space. Then get creative. In addition to a storage room in their 1.5 acres, the Joneses use empty space under their bed. Quote, we recognize that a lot of people can't have that, or it's not practical, but whatever space you have, you can make use of it, or you can make usable, end quote, Jonathan Jones said. All right, so one thing that I wanna talk about that is that the best and the easiest way for you to make sure that you're actually buying what you need is to make a meal plan. Because when you have whatever it is, for example, I'm Mexican, and my shopping list is going to be different than an American shopping list, because we have things that, such as sopes, we have tamales, we have, tacos, bunch of different things. It's going to be different than what Americans eat. So my grocery list is going to be different, but I have to look at it and say, all right, Monday breakfast, we're going to have cereal, and we're going to need, and for lunch, we're going to have, sopes. And then for dinner, we're going to have rice and beans. So you're going to have all everything you're going to need, all those ingredients put in a tote for that day. And you can do the same thing all throughout and create a whole month's worth. And then you put that in a tote, and then you put that away. Now, another point that they make, it's a storage space. Yes, it is very important for you to have storage space, because you're gonna have to put it somewhere. You have to put all your prep somewhere. And 2 years worth of food, 2 years worth of water, and all the other equipment that you use for prepping, it takes space. So if you live in a tiny apartment in Manhattan, of course it's not gonna do you any good. So it would be beneficial in your part to move out of the city into a different part of the country, preferably in a rural area. And that way you can have more space. You can have a house with a bunch of acres, and even if you get a smaller home, in the suburbs or anything like that, you can go to a storage unit and put stuff in it. But the point is that you want to have everything at home with you at all times. So it's better for you to have, at the very, very least, because you couldn't find anything else in your area, is to have 5 acres at the very least. And then you can create a root cellar, you can create a storm shelter, and you can put stuff in it. You can have different options, but you have to make sure that you do have space for everything you're going to need. Without, if you live in a tiny apartment, then don't fill it up with a lot of things that you don't need. Make room for your prepping. Now, the next challenge that I have for you says this: what preppers can teach us about dealing with the coronavirus outbreak? This from times.com. And again, they quote people, but it doesn't really help anything. Or, they're not giving any advice or anything like that. it's pretty much what the article is about, what the Times decided to make it be, and whatever it is that the people they quoted when they asked the question, that's what they put on there. But the reason that I pulled this one from Times is because of what it says. Many of those outside the prepper community have long viewed preppers as overly paranoid, a sentiment perhaps amplified by shows like Doomsday Preppers, which turns their efforts into fodder for the rest of our entertainments. That is really important because, yes, the Doomsday Preppers, you know, I've watched it. I'm sure you watched it probably in the past as well. And you really do look at it and you do laugh at those people because some of them are pretty ridiculous. Of course, I'm almost 100% sure that all of that is spun by the National Geographic, you know, because they're making a TV show, so they're gonna have to make it dramatic and all of those things. But they do paint preppers as idiots who just like to waste their money on things. All right, and of course, 2020 has shown that that's not the case at all. But getting the idea from the mainstream media and from you know, this type of shows, maybe even movies or whatever, about what prepping is, then yes, that's gonna disencourage people from preparing. Now, that's why it's important for us to have this, you know, my channel, because I give you the news, I give you the ways to prepare, and all of it makes sense without being overly dramatic or anything like it. All right, there are some things that you have to make sure that you do, because the way that things are looking around the world, you know, it points to that. Like, for example, right now, no one can deny that we're having food shortages, and not only that, food price increase. As I've shared, one of the things that came out over the weekend, all right, is that there's going to be an 8 billion food shortage, or meal shortage, excuse me. And not just that, it is projected that by 2030, food price increase will increase by 400%. A lot of people do not understand what that means. You know, when they see it, it's like, oh, I mean, things are going to get a little more expensive. No, 400% is a lot more expensive. In the next podcast, or the one after that, I'm going to be showing the inflation calculator. All right, and when you put the prices in it and the same percentage, you know, 400% increase, it shows that $1 becomes so much more. All right, actually, I do have it here because I'm getting ready to film the other podcast, and I'm gonna go more into detail in the next podcast. But it says, if in 1974 I purchased an item for $646, then in 2020 the same item would cost $3,405.82. Cumulative rate inflation is 427.2%. Now, it may not make any sense right now. It will make sense at the next podcast. But pretty much what I'm doing, the $646 figure is how much people are spending on groceries. So in order for you to get the same value of groceries back in 1974, now you would have to spend $3,405. All right, so since inflation is going to make things worse, then really for you, how much are you going to be able to buy with those $646 that, you know, the people are spending? In reality, that would decrease your groceries to how much you would spend now, $122.55. That should really blow your mind, because if they're saying that in the next 10 years that's going to happen, I say it's going to happen sooner. And in the next podcast, I will tell you why. So please come back and listen to that video. So again, if in 1974, I purchased an item for $122.55, then in 2020, the same item would cost me $646.10. The accumulative rate of inflation is 427.2%. Now, like I mentioned a minute ago, in the article, it mentions that on average, the food inflation is, or I think it's the food inflation is going to increase by 400%. That means that in some aspects it's going to go higher, in some it's going to go lower, and when they do the math, 400% is the medium. So, on average, it's going to be 400%. It could be higher or lower. So really, you will only be able to buy $122 worth of groceries instead of $646. So That is the red flag right there that you have to pay attention to. Now, the last headline that I have for you is this: NPR, prepping isn't weird anymore, it's mainstream. They're saying that it's mainstream because people are starting to look at the facts, they're starting to see the writing on the wall, and now they want to prepare. But not just regular Americans. All right? That is not what they mean by it's mainstream. They're talking about CEOs. They're talking about executives. They're talking about a bunch of other people who, any other year other than 2020, they would have said that 2020 that preppers are the stupidest people on earth. Now we have a big list of CEOs like Disney and I think it was Netflix and others that fled the country at the beginning of the pandemic. They left their position as CEOs and they just got on their jets. They headed to the mountains in New Zealand, into their bunkers, and as far as we know, they're still there, including Jeff Bezos. So yeah, that's what they mean by mainstream. And another article that came out is that in Silicon Valley, they used to make preppers. Now they're becoming preppers. Now you have to be a prepper in order for you to be in Silicon Valley. So they're late to the party. They're going to pay a higher premium for them to be able to know or to understand what we're doing. They're going to pay a higher premium to actually get prepped. And if they wait any longer, they might not even be able to get all the items that they're going to need. That's why it's important for you to get prepared. That's why it's important for you to support this podcast, so I can bring you this information and help you prepare and get everything done before anything major happens. All right, so I'm going to leave you with that. Again, I want to remind you that I'm going to be doing this podcast in Spanish. All right, I'm thinking about airing it every Tuesday and Thursday, just to test the water, see how it goes. So I would really appreciate it if you would share this with your friends and family, especially if they are Spanish speaking and they would benefit from this information. I also want to remind you about the partner that we have, greenmedicine.encyclopedia.com. You can go on there, you can check out their product, and you can use the coupon code MedMedSurvival to get $40 off. Also, I'm giving away the book. It's Preppers Secrete Cache. You can go to www.prepperssecretcache.com and you can order it from there. All we need your help is with shipping. The book is absolutely free. So I would really appreciate it if you help us out with that. Because, I want to get people as prepared as possible before anything major happens. And for some people, crap has already hit the fan. The last thing that I want to remind you is about the store, MedMedSurvivalStore.com. You can go on there and you can get all the prepping items that you need. And if you want to support this podcast, if you want to support what we're doing, making a purchase through there is really going to help. And not only that, when you make a purchase through the store, you also help me help homeless people and orphans. So I would, really appreciate it if you would check it out and buy a few things on there to help your preparedness. Especially since the Christmas season is coming around, it would really be beneficial for people to get help from us. But anyways, again, I want to remind you about sharing this with your friends and family. We're still trying to get to the 1,000 subscribers. It doesn't cost you anything if you just click that subscribe button, but it really helps me a lot. So again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.